accused in a series of very violent crimes, including. Earlier today, the United States Attorney's Office held a press conference announcing he was one of the few that they were still looking for connected to this large operation. They say moments ago he is now in custody, being held by federal officials.
Last week, everything blew up. Big U, Bricc Baby, names that used to ring out on the West Coast as respected, feared, even celebrated in the streets and in hip-hop circles, now getting snatched up in a federal sweep that left the entire internet. But that's not even the shocking part, because what no one expected was the dark web of connections that started unraveling, threads that stretch all the way back to the murder of Nipsey Hussle. Yep, you heard that right, Nip. We've been mourning this man for years, calling his murder a senseless tragedy, blaming Eric Holder and moving on. But now, we're learning it might not have been so random after all. Let's break this down, because once you connect the dots, it gets chilling. When that infamous mugshot collage of all the people arrested dropped, it looked like one big Rico takedown, like everybody got hit together. But nah, that was just optics. The truth? This has been building since way before that. The feds had been quietly watching the rolling 60s since 2020. Yep, way before Big U even popped up on their radar. And Big U wasn't just anybody. He was Nipsey Hussle's former manager, the same man who helped build his legacy, might have been part of tearing it down.
The FBI says Henley headed up the local Crips gang for decades. And investigators say that he painted himself as an entertainment executive who's been giving back to the community with various charities, but they say Henley is a...
Here's where it gets haunting. Former death row artist SKG came out swinging with bold accusations, saying straight up that Big U was involved in setting up Nipsey. She didn't sugarcoat it. She said it plainly. He had something to do with Nip's death. And listen, Big U ain't just caught up on minor charges. He's been indicted for murder, extortion, fraud, even human trafficking. These aren't rumors. These are in black and white. But let's talk Bricc Baby. He's always been a wild card, street certified, a rapper with real gang ties. But now, he's staring down multiple federal weapons charges. Not local, not state, federal. The feds claim Bricc was moving guns with another rolling 60s member. And this raises a major question. If he was moving like that in those circles, how the hell was he not involved in Nipsey's murder? Even if he didn't pull the trigger, was he supplying the gun? Was he one of the men setting the stage? Because the deeper this gets, the less it looks like a street beef gone bad, and more like a planned hit. Now let's be clear, the government hasn't officially named Bricc Baby in Nipsey's murder investigation, but that's just semantics. Because the connections, they're too loud to ignore. Wiretaps dropped, multiple indictments rolled out, and somehow Brick's name keeps floating around. He didn't get indicted with Big U, but he was mentioned. Why? Because the feds had something bigger planned for him.
Look, it's one thing to have a possession of a firearm. AKs are illegal in the state of California. They're not DA rejecting that, but what I'm telling you is it was never picked up by...
Wiretaps caught Bricc Baby talking slick about robberies, sending money to Big U, and flexing like he was untouchable. Whack 100 even came out 4 months ago claiming Bricc was a federal snitch. At first, people brushed it off. But now, Brick's in custody and the receipts are stacking. His case started way back in July 2022 when he got caught with a blicky in a parking lot in LA County. Since he's a felon, that turned into a federal problem. The feds said the weapon crossed state lines, triggering the Commerce Clause. But things didn't explode until Operation Drawdown hit. That's when everything came full circle. There's no official line connecting Bricc Baby to Nipsey's death, but the timing, the people involved, the circumstances, and it's too coincidental to dismiss.
Shoots a third time. He then kicks Nipsey before bolting toward the alley, which is where the first video began. Before the alleged shooter Nipsey, he reportedly got into a heated conversation with the Grammy Award-nominated rapper.
Here is exclusive video from Air 7 as the suspect, 29-year-old Eric Holder, is picked up by LAPD detectives at the sheriff's station in Lakewood. He was placed in an unmarked vehicle. The department says it received help from the community.
Now rewind for a second. We all remember March 31st, 2019, the day Nipsey Hussle was gunned down outside his own store. The entire city froze. Eric Holder Jr. took the fall in 2022. But now, people are asking if Bricc Baby played a role in setting that chain of events in motion. That right there, that's how the feds locked them in under federal law. Here's the kicker though, none of the guns tied to Bricc Baby match the ones Bus allegedly sold to a snitch, so it's unlikely Bricc ratted on him. But somebody did, and that's when we start seeing how the feds move. Controlled buys, wiretaps, setups, they play the long game, and in this case, they were sitting on evidence for months before making a move. Now the feds are saying Bricc Baby and his co-defendants are dangerous. else. A flight risk, a threat to the community. They're pushing hard for pre-trial detention. If he doesn't beat this case, Bricc might not touch daylight again for years. Meanwhile, more names keep dropping. 2 other dudes caught up in Operation Drawdown, Derek Andre Pard, aka Grimsky, and Zachary Garcia, aka Zeke. The charges? Ice, fentanyl, MDMA, and guns. A deadly combo. The feds say these 2 were either Rolling 60s members or closely affiliated, and because of that, every single indictment is being treated as part of one massive criminal operation. Even though these guys were running separate hustles, it's all getting lumped into one massive takedown. Grimsky and Zeke's story is messy. Boom. Feds had what they needed, and just like that, another case locked up tight.
Today, we're here to announce federal criminal charges against Eugene Henley Jr., a career criminal known as Big U, who used his contacts and leadership role in the Crips criminal street gang.
Let's circle back. Big U, the head honcho of the Rolling 60s, Nipsey's former manager, a man once seen as a community leader, and now facing federal charges so serious they read like a crime movie script. Racketeering, extortion, trafficking, fraud, robbery, illegal gambling, and worst of all, the 2021 murder of up-and-coming rapper Ray Sean Williams. According to the feds, Ray Sean dropped a diss track that sent Big U into a rage. So he allegedly lured him out to a remote area in Vegas, executed him, and dumped his body in the desert. That's not all. He ran a charity developing options supposed to keep kids away from gangs. But behind the scenes, he was allegedly scamming funds, manipulating athletes like Shaquille O'Neal and Draymond Green into donating and using the money for himself. But it gets even darker, because now we gotta ask the real question. If Big U was capable of all that, what was his real role in Nipsey Hussle's death? This was a man who helped launch Nip's career, who walked beside him, who claimed to want peace and change. But according to the feds, that community rep was all a cover. The truth, he was allegedly running a criminal empire right under our noses. And with wiretaps on Big U going back to 2021 and the Rolling 60s under surveillance since 2020, we gotta ask, what were they really trying to hide? So now let's sit with this for a minute. The man who helped Nipsey rise, who posed as a beacon of hope for South Central's youth, is being painted by the feds as a puppet master, pulling strings behind fake charities, shady businesses, and maybe even hits. And suddenly, Nipsey's death starts to look very different. This ain't just about Eric Holder anymore. This is about betrayal. It's about the possibility that Nipsey was taken out not by some lone wolf in a petty beef, but by a system of people around him, people he trusted, people who stood next to him in the community, shook his hand, maybe even prayed with him. And Bricc Baby, he might have been deeper in the cut than anyone realized. The feds didn't slap him with random gun charges. They had wiretaps, conversations, connections, movement of weapons with other Rolling 60s members. They watched him long enough to build a separate case entirely outside of Big U's indictment. That means they saw him as his own threat. That means they believe he wasn't just a pawn, he was a player. Let's go back to Operation Drawdown for a second. This wasn't your average sweep, it was massive, coordinated, surgical, the kind of operation where the feds don't move unless they've got you dead to rights. And yet, there's still this fog of mystery around why Bricc wasn't arrested sooner. He had an open federal gun case in 2022, but no court date, no trial, no real movement. That silence, it had people whispering that maybe, just maybe, he was cooperating. Whack 100 said it first, called him a snitch. Now the streets are echoing it. Because if you're moving that heavy, that reckless, and the feds don't pull you in immediately, there's only a few explanations, and none of them are good. Let's talk about Joshua Hala, another name in the indictment. He ain't even officially labeled as a Rolling 60s member, but he still got slapped with the same charges: distribution and possession of a firearm during drug trafficking. The only reason he's not deeper in it, he wasn't a felon. That's it. These are the kind of details the feds care about. But the streets are watching for the bigger picture. And the picture that's coming together, it's one of corruption, power, betrayal, and bloodshed. Because we can't ignore the fact that Nipsey Hussle, the man who tried to bring light to the hood, the man who gave back, built businesses, preached unity, was killed outside his own store. A man who stood for something was taken down in broad daylight, and now we're learning the same people who smiled in his face might have been plotting behind his back. How is it that so many Rolling 60s members are under federal investigation? How is it that so many of them are being tied to weapons, trafficking, and fraud, while the man they once claimed as family, Nip, was executed like a dog? It don't sit right. It can't. And then there's the Ray Sean Williams case. Another young rapper, another rising voice, another black man with something to say, murdered because of a diss track? That's what the feds are saying. Big U allegedly lured Ray Sean to a remote spot in Vegas, shot him, and dumped the body like he was nothing. All because of words. If that's true, if that's who Big U really is, then who else did he see as a threat? And what exactly happened with Nipsey Hussle? Because remember, Nipsey didn't just preach peace. He was vocal. He called things out. He wasn't afraid to speak on street politics. He wasn't afraid to stand tall in his truth. And sometimes, that makes you a target, especially when you're trying to change the game in a system built to destroy you. Now picture this, a criminal enterprise disguised as a music network, a so-called non-profit being used to funnel money, federal wiretaps capturing conversations about guns, drugs, and murder, athletes unknowingly backing fake charities, young artists getting manipulated, and in the center, Big U, the so-called OG, the man behind Developing Options, a charity meant to steer kids away from gang life. The same man the feds are now saying was extorting artists, orchestrating murders, and laundering money through a system of lies. It's devastating, not just because of what he did, but because of what he represented to people. And now, everything feels like a lie. And Bricc Baby, if he really was moving guns with the crew, if he was funneling money to Big U while the feds listened in, if he was that close to all the players, then maybe, just maybe, he was never as removed from Nipsey's death as he wanted us to think. Even if he didn't order the hit, even if he didn't pull the trigger, he might have helped build the stage where it all went down. And that's a betrayal that cuts deep, because this wasn't supposed to happen to Nipsey. Not Nip, not the man who turned his corner into a kingdom, who bought the block instead of burning it down, who lifted up his people, gave them jobs, fed their kids, and led by example. He was supposed to be protected, especially by the ones who claimed him. So if this really was an inside job, if Big U and Bricc Baby and whoever else helped create the storm that killed him, then the streets owe Nipsey more than justice. They owe him the truth. And the feds? They might just be getting close to it. With all these indictments, with all these wiretaps, with all these coincidences, it's only a matter of time before more names drop, because the case is wide open now, and when you start digging through the dirt, sooner or later, you hit the bodies. This ain't just about music, or gangs, or even crime. This is about the soul of the culture, and what happens when the ones who are supposed to protect the community are the same ones tearing it apart from the inside. So what do you think? Was Bricc Baby just caught in the crossfire, or was he part of something much, much darker? And Big U? Was he the puppet master pulling strings, or just another street general who lost control? And most importantly, was Nipsey Hussle sacrificed by the very machine he tried to change? Let us know in the comments, because this story ain't over, not even close. Not even close.